Alright, hello and welcome everybody to our first real learning about Star Citizen episode. Today we're going to be talking about some basics of flight and we're going to focus on energy management in a dogfight. The first thing I want to bring your attention is that in the recent change, the Arena Commander, once you get seated in your plane, you have to hit Tab in order to go into the free look mode to select any of the menu units. It didn't used to be that way. That is the way it is now in the most recent patch, and I'm sure by the time you see this, that's the way it'll be as well. So we're going to go into a drone sim, and for the purposes of this exercise, we're not going to be going into the Vanduul Swarm with competition and enemies in it. We're just going to do a Dying Star free flight. We are in a Hornet, and let's go.
Free flight mode.
Anvil Aerospace. All systems online.
And with that, here we go. Welcome back. This is our spaceship, Anvil Hornet. It is the bread and butter dogfighter. And we're going to talk about energy management today. Energy management in dogfight is very important. What it means is essentially holding on to the kinetic energy that you've developed in your ship, which allows you to maneuver. It comes from traditional dogfighting techniques in atmospheric conditions. In atmospheric conditions, such as flying on a planet, it's much more important than it is here, but it's not without importance in space, and to a very great degree as well. And that's why we're going to start with this this basic tutorial on dogfighting, traditional dogfighting techniques on energy management. What it essentially means let me explain what it means in traditional space atmospheric flight. Energy management is the more speed and the more altitude you have, the more energy you have. The atmosphere doesn't apply out here, but it's an important concept to understand that when you have altitude over another plane, you have more potential energy to expel. So that's why you'll see in a lot of old dogfight and World War II films, they get altitude and then they dive into their targets. This allows you to do a couple things. Number one, it allows you to go by and strafe your target with guns and continue past them at a speed and rate of which they will not be able to catch up to you and take shots back at you. So that's an important concept because that does apply to space flight as well. The other thing, and what makes it so important in space flight, is that you can basically reverse your thrusters, or you try to put too much reversal of your flight path, it will slow you down. And that's what energy management really is in the arena of spaceflight. It's about holding on to that same kinetic energy that you have as far as, being able to move forward and maneuver the spacecraft. So you see we're developed some kinetic energy here. We're moving around. Well, if I try to maneuver and then turn really tight, you'll see that my flight path is kind of zeroed out, and I've lost all that kinetic energy. Wherein if I am maneuvering at a high rate of speed and I turn slowly, I'm going to retain that kinetic energy. You can see the motion that I have now, right? So if I slowly do the turn, I'm maintaining my speed. And that's important because speed is advantage in dogfighting. You want to be able to run from your enemy. You want your enemy to have to track you. Speed is your best defense in a gunfight. And because speed equates to maneuverability. So now I've done a complete 180 and I haven't really lost any of my speed, where if I went like this really sharp and then cut my throttle, I've zeroed out my basic maneuvering speed. I did a 180, yes, but I did it so quickly that I lost all my forward momentum. And you can see obviously what a target you would be sitting here in the middle of nowhere without any speed. It just means that you're going to get shot down, basically. I want to explain some of the other HUD parts that will help you to keep track of your kinetic speed. One is the ticker tape on the left, which is now reading 100, which is essentially your velocity. Although I believe in this instance it might equate to thrust. Yes, it's thrust. It looks like they don't have a speed ticker tape. It looks like what they're doing is percentage of throttle on the left. That's why if I go and hit afterburners, I'm going to get 100 and I think it's 150, 100 and almost 200% thrust. So that's a huge jump there. Afterburners will definitely move you along. In addition to that, so at the center, you'll notice that when I start to turn, that there's a lagging item with a caret.
You are approaching simulation
better not
boundary.
approach the simulation boundary. He's going to get really mad at me. So I did a quick 180 and I hit thrusters, which in a really highly maneuverable craft like this works really well. And something that's maybe not so maneuverable won't work so well. That's what's going to make this such a great dog fighter, is that it can create changes in its vector and its flight path really fast, and that's going to be really difficult to hit. But you see that caret with the ball with the caret below it, and it's lagging behind my angle of attack. My angle of attack is where my nose is pointing. You'll see that ball that is fluctuating above and below my center point, which is my angle of attack. That ball indicates the trajectory that my spacecraft is actually taking. And that's why when I say you turn really sharp, you'll see that that ball goes way down. Well, that ball is going to indicate that your velocity is still moving forward despite where your angle of attack is and where your nose is pointing. This is an important concept to understand, because by using that ball and by using that caret, you can keep the difference between where your nose is pointing and where the velocity of your aircraft is traveling into a relatively close proximity. The closer the proximity, the more your angle of attack is actually reduced, because the definition of the difference of where your nose is pointing versus your velocity vector, which is where your aircraft is flying to. So what we're going to do is you're going to watch the ball and the caret, which is the flight path, and you're going to watch me make this 180-degree turn, and you'll see we're at 100% throttle, and I'm going to pull it back. Now you're going to watch it. I'm going to want to bring it as far down as I can, maybe below to the bottom of the screen, but not quite to the bottom of the screen. And you can see that my flight path is changing pretty fast, but the velocity vector is not that much different. I'm going to show you this same maneuver in a different viewpoint. Here we go. Okay. So we're going to try a controlled turn, and you're going to see the velocity and where we end up, hopefully. See how the momentum is starting to follow the direction that the ship is pointing? And you're going to see it come around again and come around again and come around again. And that's because we're maintaining a relative proximity between the angle of our nose and the actual flight path of our craft. You'll see it deviate there a little bit. See, there's where the center line was, and that was our angle of attack. So you'll notice the far left of the screen, where just below the spacecraft that's outlined in the ghost image, you'll see lat, lon, and vert. These are the g-forces that you're exerting versus these three axes. And if we see this, we see that we have a longitudinal g, which is, it's actually flashing red when I go back and forth, because there's so much thrust in the craft that it can pull more than 7 Gs in that direction, and I was going back and forth there. So that's another good indicator to tell you whether you're turning too fast or not. I don't think that they've completely implemented the G-force restrictions that they planned for Arena Commander. However, that's going to be another tool for you, and watch as we'll travel. We're traveling basically, you're at 0G because you're at full throttle and you're at full velocity. When I start pulling back on the stick, you're going to see the G-forces start to rise in different directions, 2 and 3, and it's actually not possible until you hit the afterburners to pull excessive Gs, because I don't think that the vector thrusters, which are your maneuver thrusters, have enough thrust to create the kind of G-forces that would cause you to perhaps black out or red out in a reverse situation. Energy management is somewhat tied to your maximum G-forces that you can handle, and I think it's important to mention at this particular point that you want to turn by pulling your stick back. In other words, if I am going in this direction and I want to make a left turn, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the spaceship completely 90 degrees on its side, and then I'm going to pull back on the stick. The reason is the difference. Typically, the human body is designed to be vertical, so it can withstand more G's, or it responds better to G's when those G's are forced downward. If you go into a reverse G situation such as this, you're going to have a red out, and the G's that would take to cause you to see nothing but red because your blood is rushing to your head is going to be less than that of what it's going to take to knock you out. I don't know the exact G measurements, but the typical human body, I think it's somewhere around 6 Gs. I think with a spacesuit,
you are approaching simulation boundary.
You can run in excess of 7 to 9 Gs for short periods of time if you're trained. So that is why you actually have 3 different axes of G-force in this simulation. It doesn't look like the lateral G-forces are working. Well, I guess like they are. The lateral G-forces of 1 to 2 to 3 that you see there are basically as a result of me hitting what in an aircraft would be called the rudder, or the latitude axis of the thrusters. So it looks to be that the longitudinal axis is where your maximum Gs are going to be, and that's because your most powerful thrusters operate on the longitudinal axis. So if I'm going to do a smooth turn, I'm probably not going to be using those longitudinal thrusters to make my turn. Or if I do a snap turn like this and then hit afterburner, then I do. See, I pulled up to 14 Gs by doing that.
You are approaching simulation boundary.
That's probably far beyond what you're going to be able to do in the game as far as maneuvering, and I better start getting back to, there we go, where I'm supposed to be. But let's go back to review basically what we've talked about. So energy management in a dogfight. It's important because it's important to keep moving. If you keep moving, then you can maneuver. If you can maneuver, then you can avoid things like guns, and more likely than not, most engagements will not be with guns, they'll be with missiles. However, gunfighting is probably the first skill that you should learn, because it's very closely tied to maneuvering. And maneuvering is what helps you avoid missiles, among other things. And that'll be in some of our future episodes and tutorials on basic dogfighting. Again, maintaining forward velocity is key to staying alive. So you want to control your angle of attack, you want to control your velocity vector, you want to control your turn so that you don't come to a dead stop in the middle of a dogfight. A dead stop is dead, basically. So that's what we have on energy management today. I hope you find it informative. I hope that it helps you, and I hope that you enjoy your time in the Star Citizen universe and dogfight with success. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.